I entered the room on my wedding night, but every step felt like a burden. My bride sat quietly on the bed, adorned like a dream, her face glowing with beauty and grace. Any other man might have been overwhelmed by her presence, but my chest burned with silent rage. I didn't want to be here. I hadn't chosen this marriage, it was forced upon me. My mother had pushed me into this room and locked the decision just as tightly. The marriage had been arranged as part of a mutual family deal. If I didn't accept this girl, Arisha, then her brother would divorce my sister. That was the leverage they used, and that was the weight on my shoulders. I had no hatred for Arisha herself. She seemed decent and undeniably beautiful. But my heart belonged to someone else, Manal. I had loved Manal for years. We had made promises, dreamt of a life together. My love for her ran deep, and no amount of tradition or beauty could replace that. So, as Arisha sat on the bed, probably nervous and hopeful, I felt nothing but discomfort. Her presence reminded me of everything I had lost. I barely glanced at her before walking straight to the bathroom. When I came out, I changed into simple clothes, grabbed a pillow from the bed, and threw it on the sofa. Without a word, I lay down and turned my back to her. I knew what kind of message I was sending. It was deliberate. I didn't want her to think this marriage meant anything to me. From the corner of my eye, I saw her looking at me, confused, maybe hurt, but I didn't care. I wanted her to understand on her own that this arrangement had no space for love, that she was only here because of pressure and manipulation. I hoped she would quietly walk away from my life one day, sparing us both the burden. I pretended to sleep, closing my eyes tightly even though I was wide awake. A few minutes passed in silence. Then I heard the soft rustling of fabric. She was moving. I kept still, breathing slow and steady, not wanting to give her any signal to approach. But she did. I felt her presence before I saw her. She sat down on the floor beside the sofa, her face close to mine. I could feel the warmth of her breath. She whispered, "Are you upset with me?" Her voice trembled, uncertain. I said nothing. Then gently she placed her hand on my face and traced my lips with her fingertips. That's when I snapped. I jolted upright, my face twisted in disgust. The softness of her touch had made my skin crawl, not because it was unpleasant, but because it wasn't hers. It wasn't Manal's. I shoved her hand away with force, my voice sharp with fury. "Have you no shame?" I barked. "You're bold, shameless, and completely out of line. Go change your clothes and sleep. And if you come near me again, I swear I'll burn this room to the ground." Her eyes widened with fear, and she took a step back immediately. She looked stunned, her lips trembling, unsure of what she had done wrong. But to me, her mere presence was wrong. I didn't care if she had approached me with innocence or affection. I didn't want her. I didn't choose her. This wasn't love, it was coercion dressed in bridal red. For a brief moment, I felt the urge to storm out of the room altogether, to leave this house and escape the suffocating consequences of a marriage I never consented to. But I couldn't. I knew my mother was still awake, likely sitting outside the door, ensuring that I didn't do anything to jeopardize this deal. Her entire focus had always been on preserving my sister's marriage. My emotions, my choices, they had never been part of the equation. I turned my face away and lay back down on the sofa, shutting my eyes to everything. A cold silence followed. Then I heard it, quiet, muffled sobs. Arisha was crying, trying to stifle her weeping into the pillows, but the sound reached me, and though I heard it clearly, I buried my ears under a cushion, unwilling to let even her pain affect me. I didn't want to feel guilt. I didn't want to acknowledge that she was also a victim of someone else's decisions. Time passed slowly. Her sobs faded into stillness. In the middle of the night, I cautiously turned to glance at the bed. She was lying motionless in the same bridal outfit, her face turned toward the wall. She hadn't changed her clothes. Maybe she still held on to some hope that perhaps in the later hours of the night, I'd warm up, speak kindly, make room for her, but I had no such intention. I watched her for a moment longer, then turned away again, reminding myself of Manal, of the life we could have had, the dreams now shattered by manipulation. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to escape. Yet somehow sleep came anyway, pulling me under with guilt and bitterness swirling just beneath the surface. And when I woke up hours later, the world had changed. What I saw next left me speechless. Morning light crept into the room, but it wasn't the sunlight that woke me. It was the silence. The kind of silence that feels staged, too deliberate. I opened my eyes slowly, still foggy from the disturbed sleep, only to find her standing in front of me. And what she wore made my breath catch for a moment, not out of attraction, but pure disbelief. She was dressed in a sheer blue nightgown, revealing just enough to make her intentions clear. Her hair was loose, her body language calm and graceful, yet every inch of her appearance screamed seduction. I sat up instantly, my mind whirling. For a split second, I faltered. Any man would. But then, as if summoned by guilt, Manal's image surged in my mind, her laughter, her eyes, her love. That was all it took. My expression darkened. I stood up, voice laced with anger. "What is this supposed to mean?" I snapped. "Didn't I already tell you not to try anything shameless? Is that how your entire family is, pushing women like bait to trap men?" She didn't respond. She didn't fight back. She simply stepped back quietly, eyes cast down, and returned to the bed. Her silence felt heavier than any argument. She didn't even bother changing her clothes. She just sat there, still, like a statue of rejection and confusion. I waited, expecting her to say something, to cry, to complain, but she didn't. And that unnerved me even more. When the morning fully arrived, I expected drama. I thought she would cry to her family, accuse me, pack her bags, and leave. But instead, I was met with an even more unsettling sight. Arisha was dressed like a bride again. Her hair was neatly done, makeup fresh, a soft smile on her lips as she greeted guests who had arrived from her side of the family. Among them was my sister, whose marriage had been used to trap me in this situation. To my surprise, Arisha welcomed her with warmth and joy, acting like nothing had happened the night before. She didn't say a word about my behavior. She didn't play the victim. My sister, seeing her smiling, looked visibly relieved. She came to me privately later and folded her hands in desperation. "You know I'm childless," she said, eyes filled with tears. "I only agreed to this marriage because my husband threatened to leave me. His mother was pressing him every day. This was the only way I could protect my marriage. I know you love someone else, but for my sake, please accept her." I looked at her, torn between the anger in my heart and the pain in hers. I said nothing. I couldn't make promises I wasn't ready to keep. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I already knew. I needed to see Manal again. I needed to explain. And so, when Arisha left with her family later that day, I made up my mind. I went to find the woman I truly loved. As soon as Arisha left with her family, I got dressed and made my way toward Manal's house. My mind was a storm of thoughts. I knew I had wronged her by marrying someone else, even if it hadn't been by choice. But I believed, foolishly perhaps, that she would understand if I just explained. She knew how deeply I loved her. She knew the promises we had made. I just needed her to look into my eyes and see the pain I was carrying. I had never stopped loving her. Not for a second. When I reached her home and knocked on the door, her mother answered with a tight-lipped expression. I asked for Manal, but she hesitated. Then, without a word, she walked away, and moments later, Manal appeared. But the Manal I saw wasn't the one I remembered. Her eyes were red, her expression cold. She didn't say a single word. I tried to speak, tried to explain everything, from the forced marriage to the emotional trap I was thrown into. But she simply turned and shut the door on my face. I stood there for nearly an hour, hoping she would return, that maybe her anger would soften, but she didn't. That silence was heavier than any insult. I walked back home feeling more defeated than I ever had. The rejection from Manal made the weight of my marriage to Arisha feel even more unbearable. My plan to free myself had failed, and now I was sinking further into something I didn't want, something that felt more like a punishment than a commitment. That night, Arisha returned. I had no desire to speak with her, no strength left for another confrontation. So I lay down on the bed and pretended to sleep. She moved quietly through the room, freshened up, and came out of the bathroom dressed once again in something provocative. I could sense her pacing around, organizing things, subtly trying to gain my attention. A few moments later, she came and sat beside me on the sofa. Her fingers brushed through my hair softly as she asked in a low, careful voice, "Will you sleep on the sofa again tonight? How long will I have to sleep alone?" I didn't respond. I was too stunned by her persistence. The night before, I had insulted her, rejected her, and still, here she was, soft, inviting, unshaken. Any other man might have taken it as devotion. but to me it felt calculated. I stood up without a word and walked out of the room. My mother wasn't guarding the door that night. She had probably assumed, seeing Arisha's patience, that we were finally getting along. I climbed the stairs to the rooftop, breathing in the cold night air. I needed distance. I needed to remind myself who I was and what I didn't want to become. But a man, no matter how strong his will, isn't made of stone. And that night, I would come dangerously close to losing control. I stayed on the rooftop for as long as I could endure. The cold air bit through my clothes, but it felt better than the burning tension I left behind in that room. Each gust of wind helped cool the fire inside me. The frustration, the guilt, the ache. I wasn't in love with Arisha, and yet the circumstances were pulling us into a dangerous closeness I hadn't agreed to. My marriage was a trap, and she was becoming its bait. After nearly 2 hours, the cold became unbearable. My fingers trembled. My body began to shiver uncontrollably. I had no choice but to return to the room. I hoped she would be asleep, wrapped in a blanket, and I could slip back onto the sofa unnoticed. But when I stepped in, the sight before me made me stop in my tracks. Arisha was wide awake, sitting comfortably on the bed, still wearing that same revealing nightgown. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering screen of the television. But it wasn't just any movie playing. It was an explicit English film, the kind I never imagined someone like her would watch, especially not so brazenly. She didn't flinch when she saw me. She didn't even try to switch the channel or cover herself. She looked at me directly, her eyes strange, curious, determined, and something else I couldn't name. I was shocked, ashamed, angry. I walked over and turned the TV off without a word. Then I collapsed on the sofa, unsure whether it was exhaustion or mental fatigue that made me feel so heavy. My mind reeled. Who was this girl? What kind of upbringing had she received? Why did her brother blackmail my family to marry her off to me when someone like her could easily find a match on her own? I was still lost in thought when she approached again. This time she knelt beside me and gently held my hand. Before I could react, she pulled me toward the bed. "Please, just lie here tonight," she said quietly. "I'll sleep on the sofa. You don't have to suffer discomfort because of me. I know it's not ideal, but the sofa doesn't even let you stretch your legs fully." Her tone was sincere, her gestures kind, and I was cold, tired, and too confused to argue. So I let her guide me. I lay on the bed silently while she placed her pillow on the sofa and tucked herself in without another word. I told myself it was just for the night, that this didn't mean anything. But as sleep crept over me, I ignored the warning signs. I ignored the heat between us, the weight of temptation, and the madness of what might come next. And when I opened my eyes again, I realized I had walked right into the trap. When I opened my eyes in the middle of the night, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The room was dark, yet something about the silence felt unnatural, too deep, too still. I tried to shift my arms only to realize they wouldn't move. My hands were stuck. So were my feet. Confusion hit first, then a sudden surge of panic. My limbs were tightly bound to the corners of the bed with soft but firm cloth, restricting any movement. "Arisha!" I shouted in a hoarse whisper, trying to make sense of what was happening. What the hell is going on? A few seconds later, a dim light flickered on. And there she was, my wife standing near the bed wearing the same revealing nightgown. But this time, something had changed in her face. Her eyes weren't warm or patient or afraid. They were focused, almost blank, like she had crossed some invisible threshold inside herself. I turned my face away, ashamed of her presence, embarrassed by my helplessness. "Untie me," I snapped. "This isn't funny." But she didn't listen. She climbed onto the bed, slow and silent, like a predator moving toward prey, and then she did the unthinkable. She began to touch me, forcefully, purposefully, without care for my resistance. I tried to move, tried to push her away with my voice, with my anger, but the bonds held me down and she was stronger than her appearance suggested. My words turned into pleas, my anger into silence. By the time she finally loosened my restraints, I was no longer in control of myself. The humiliation, the frustration, the physical reaction my body betrayed me with, it all overwhelmed me. I gave in, not out of love, not even out of lust, but because I was defeated, cornered, invaded, and emptied. When it was over, she lay beside me without a word, as if what had just happened was natural, acceptable, even intimate. But for me, it was something else entirely. Morning arrived far too soon. I sat up, dressed in silence, and stared at the wall for a long time. I didn't know who I hated more, her or myself. I felt like I had lost something sacred. something that wasn't supposed to be taken without consent. And worst of all, I had betrayed Manal in the one way I swore I never would. Unable to stay in that room, I walked out of the house and wandered the streets with no destination. My job was on hold due to the marriage leave, so I had nothing to do but breathe in the dust and confusion of the city. I had been trapped. She had done what she came to do, and now I was both the victim and the sinner. But when I returned home that evening, expecting a smug, victorious expression on her face, I found something entirely different. She was crying. I entered the house expecting cold silence, perhaps even quiet satisfaction from Arisha. After all, she had achieved what she'd wanted, forced intimacy, a physical claim, a place in my bed. But what I walked into instead left me stunned. She was in the living room, sobbing uncontrollably in front of my mother, her voice trembling with rage and hurt. "He's not a man," she cried. "He treats me like an animal. I can't live with him anymore. He used me." I froze at the threshold, unable to believe what I was hearing. My mother sat beside her, visibly shaken, trying to console her. As I stepped forward, confused and speechless, Arisha abruptly stood and pulled down her sleeve, revealing a dark bruise on her shoulder. "He did this to me," she cried, pointing at me with trembling fingers. I stared, my jaw clenched. The marks were real, yes, but they weren't the result of force or abuse. They were the remnants of that night, of what she had initiated and I had failed to resist. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to defend myself, but my mother looked at me with such cold disappointment that I felt my words collapse inside my throat. "How could you?" she asked. "I didn't raise you to treat a woman like this. Apologize to her right now. Do whatever it takes to make this right." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that she had tied me down, that she had taken control of me in the most humiliating way. But how could I say those words? What man would admit to being overpowered by his wife, especially in front of his own mother? I stood there, seething in silence, as Arisha wiped her tears and began packing her bags. "I can't live with him," she said firmly. "I'll go back to my parents' house." I followed her into the bedroom and grabbed her wrist. Not roughly, but enough to stop her. "What kind of game is this?" I asked, my voice low and bitter. "You forced yourself on me, and now you're acting like a victim?" She yanked her hand away, eyes blazing. "I only asked for what was mine, my right as your wife. But you didn't just reject me. You humiliated me. You turned something sacred into violence." Her words made my head spin. Was she delusional? Or was this manipulation crafted so carefully that even I began to doubt my memory of the night? I tried to stop her, but she walked out, suitcase in hand. Minutes later, my sister called in tears. "What have you done?" she cried. "Her brother is threatening to divorce me now. You promised me." Pressure mounted from every side. My mother glared, my sister wept, and I, standing in the wreckage of everyone's expectations, was being painted as the villain. Even when I wasn't the one who started the fire. I was drowning in accusations I couldn't defend myself against. My mother wouldn't speak to me unless it was through gritted teeth. My sister was inconsolable. She had done everything to protect her fragile marriage, and now it stood on the edge of collapse. Again, because of me. And Arisha, she had returned to her family home wearing the bruises of a night she had initiated and twisting them into symbols of victimhood. At my mother's insistence, and with my sister's future hanging in the balance, I swallowed what little pride I had left and went to Arisha's home to bring her back. I didn't apologize because I believed I was wrong. I apologized because that was the only option left. She stood silently while I spoke, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she picked up her bag and walked toward the door. She returned with me to the house, but everything about her had changed. There was no more effort to dress up, no seductive looks, no more nighttime provocations. She avoided my eyes. She never came near me. It was as if I no longer existed in her world, and strangely, it unsettled me more than her previous boldness. Days turned into weeks. We lived like strangers in the same room. I spent my nights tossing on the sofa, staring at the ceiling, wondering what had really happened to my life. The woman I had loved, Manal, was gone. The woman I had married, Arisha, was unreadable. And I was trapped between a mistake I didn't make and a marriage I never wanted. Then one morning, my mother came into the room, her face unreadable. "She's expecting," she said simply. The words hit me like a punch. Arisha? Pregnant? I walked into the room where Arisha was folding laundry in silence. She didn't even look up as I stood there, heart racing. She didn't look proud or excited. She didn't look guilty either. She looked blank, as though even this news meant nothing. Over the next few days, her distance grew. She barely spoke. She stopped reacting to anything I said. It was like she had locked herself into some inner world and I wasn't invited in. My mother thought it was hormonal. I felt something darker, like she had gotten what she needed and now didn't care what came next. And yet, something about it didn't sit right with me. Her behavior, her silence, even the timing of it all. Late one night when she was asleep, I glanced through the side drawer of her closet and found something that stopped my breath. A hospital file, a medical report. And what I read next made the floor disappear beneath my feet. She was pregnant, yes. But she had been 1 month pregnant on the day we got married. The room spun around me as I stared at the medical report. I read it again and again, hoping I had misunderstood. But the dates were clear. Arisha was already 1 month pregnant at the time of our wedding. A chill spread through my chest. Every strange moment now made sense. Her desperation, her boldness, her calculated silence. She hadn't wanted a husband. She had wanted a name for her unborn child, and that name was supposed to be mine. I gathered all her reports and went straight to a private doctor the next morning. After reviewing everything, he confirmed it. There was no doubt Arisha had conceived long before our wedding. I felt sick, used, humiliated. Fueled by rage, I went to her parents' house. I threw the reports on the table in front of her mother and brother. "You knew," I said. "You knew everything, and still tricked me into this marriage." Her brother's face turned pale. After a moment of silence, he dropped his head. "We found out too late," he mumbled. "The man who did this to her left. We panicked. We needed to save our family's honor." My voice shook. "So you destroyed mine instead?" He folded his hands, begging me to stay quiet, pleading that I accept the child and protect their reputation. But I had heard enough. My life had been sacrificed for their cover-up. I wouldn't let it continue. I divorced Arisha that same evening. And as expected, the backlash hit hard. My sister was divorced too. I brought her back home with me, her face swollen from crying, her dreams shattered. She had no idea about the truth behind Arisha's pregnancy. But I knew now. I had been used, and I was done staying silent. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild what little remained of the life I once had. I arranged for my sister's remarriage, this time to a kind-hearted man from a respected family. By the grace of God, she conceived just 2 months later. Watching her smile again felt like redemption. At least one heart, broken by my silence, was starting to heal. News of my divorce from Arisha eventually reached Manal. She contacted me after months of painful silence. Her voice on the phone trembled. "Why did you leave her?" she asked. I didn't lie. I told her everything, how I was tricked, manipulated, and used to protect someone else's secret. I admitted my mistakes, my moments of weakness, my regrets. And then I asked for her forgiveness, not because I deserved it, but because my soul was tired of carrying the weight. To my surprise, Manal forgave me. She saw the truth in my voice, the pain in my words. After everything, she agreed to marry me. Our wedding is set for next month. Looking back, I often wonder if divorcing Arisha was the right thing to do. Some might say I should have protected her for the child's sake or for society's judgment. But the truth is, sometimes you have to take a hard stand to protect what little honor you have left. Arisha destroyed not just my trust, but my sister's life as well. What was done under the name of honor was nothing more than betrayal. I don't hate her now, I pity her. And I pray that one day she too learns that the truth may hurt, but living a lie will always ruin more than it saves.